Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's product demo, how to create immersive day-in-the-life simulations for real-world e-learning with Brendan Langan and Matthew Shell of Capsim Management Solutions. This is a collaborative session, so we invite you all to turn on your cameras and use that raise your hand function to ask questions throughout and in the Q&A following the sessions. And without further ado, Brendan, Matt, I'll let you take it away.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Hope. Very much appreciate the introduction. And hello, everybody, and thank you for joining our session today, how to create immersive day-in-the-life simulations for real-world e-learning. My name is Matthew Shell. I'm Capsim's Market Development Manager, where my primary role is to help both our corporate as well as academic authors with creating their very own custom micro-simulations for a variety of different uses. Now, this is going to be a authoring platform that's going to allow you to create custom experiential learning tools that will assist in everything from aiding in the selection process to helping spice up your compliancy training, or even to identify skill gaps within your organization. Now, I'm also joined today with our Director in Product Design and Development, Brendan Langan. Brendan?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Fantastic conference to get to share a little bit of what we've been working on at Capsim and how you all can actually use the authoring tools that we've created to create the trainings and assessments and experiences that Matt mentioned. So very excited. Let's dive in, Matt.
Absolutely, can do, Brendan. And what I figured I'd do first is just to start off by showcasing a quick agenda on what we'll cover over the next 30 to 35 minutes. Where I wanted to start was just provide a brief introduction to us as a company here at Capsim and a little bit about our history with working with corporations to meet their training needs. And it actually provides a great story as to how we got to creating this CapsimInbox authoring platform. And then from there, we'll of course do a very top level introduction to the authoring platform itself, detailing what exactly can be utilized for and how you can start creating your own simulations as early as today. And then from there, we'll go ahead and describe an output of the platform, what we refer to as a CapsimInbox micro simulation, and take a walk through briefly through the participant experience, everything from the simulation itself to the types of reporting metrics that we're able to provide instantaneously with this platform. And then after that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Brendan, where he's going to take us directly into the platform behind the scenes to show you just how easy it is to start making a solution that's not only very experiential, but is going to directly meet the needs of your particular organization. And then at the end of the call, we'll of course cover some quick use cases of how we've seen this utilized so far and answer any questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, just to give you all a brief introduction to us as Capsim as a company, we have been in the simulation industry for well over 35 years at this point. In fact, we started back in the mid-1980s creating custom simulations for many corporations out there, which we continue all the way through to today. However, over the last 20, 30 years or so, a lot of that time has been spent with your more typical on-site 1 to 3 day training programs where we're teaching on everything from business strategy and business acumen and helping companies identify high potential employees, as well as aiding in executive training functions. So as a result of this experience, we really keep our ear to the ground with a lot of the clients you'll see on the right side of the screen as to what are the needs that they're looking for in terms of learning and development and their professional development training programs, and how can we better assist with that. And what we heard from them, and which is backed up by a lot of the research out there, is that if there is one key area that they really wanted to focus on, it was identifying skill gaps. More specifically, being able to have the ability to assess and measure key soft skills like problem solving, leadership, and communicative capabilities within their organization. And what this did was provide us with a great opportunity to create a brand new solution that would be a little bit more self-directed, more individualized, that would give direct feedback to participants as well as to administrators as to the feedback on that skill performance within a given company and comparing it to the world at large to see where they're at. And we thought for today's presentation that there'd be no better way of demonstrating how you could utilize this platform than to provide a practical example. And in which case here, I'd like to bring up that practical example and I'd like to hand it off to Brendan. Brendan?
Yes, this is the best part. CapsimInbox really paints a picture of a day in the life. And what we're looking at as a sample situation right here is actually a little bit of put on your manager hat. One of your direct reports is sending you this email. And I'll provide a high level overview, but then we're going to actually ask you what you would do in this situation. So first off, this employee has recently won the Service Excellence Award at the company. They're a high performer, even though they've only been there over the past year. So new employee, high performer. They really appreciated positive feedback in the job performance and the one-on-one meeting that happened recently. And this person is very curious to take on more responsibility. So this expands into the morning of. Sanjay, one of the colleagues, told him that they have a chance to represent Circatech about our newest offerings. And this is a great chance to expand the business. So while this person has never done client presentations for someone this big, they really want the opportunity. And this is the classic bit that's at the core of CapsimInbox. What would you do? And so we're going to open this up. There's 4 options in this unique situation, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll read these out, but what I want you to do is, as you're reading through this and as I talk through it, put the number of the option that you would choose into the chat, and we'll go over some of the best practices here. So the first option would be, you can let them know this is too big of an opportunity to use someone without more work experience. Option 2, you can tell the person they can sit in on team meetings to gain exposure. Option 3, you can allow the person to attend the presentation in order to learn the ropes. Or option 4, you can have them create a first draft of the presentation to give to the team for feedback. So throw those into the chat, options 1, 2, 3, or 4. And again, you are the manager in this situation. Your employee is looking for this opportunity. Oh, wow, we got some differences. I love this. I love seeing different options, and we got a lot of people chiming in. 28 options right there, and counting.
Lots of 3s and 4s.
Lots of 3s and 4s, a few 2s in there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Hope, I'm going to signal yours as the final one to come through. So this is one of those situations that we look at CapsimInbox as having kind of a good option, a better option, and a best option. Now, I'll preface by saying in each of these situations, we look at our research from our industrial organizational psychologists who've studied the future of work and the field of work as it is today, how to best manage the organization to bring the most of their people. And so this is all rooted in some deep scientific inquiry and research. In fact, the best option of any of these is option 4. So even though option 3, to ask them to attend the presentation and learn the ropes, is a good option, option 4 is actually putting them in the forefront of leading through example. And by building the first draft of the presentation, they have involvement that's tied into the end result and can get feedback on this. It's also a great point for me as the manager to say, oh, you have looked at it in this particular way. Let's shift that perspective a little bit so you can see how the end user might look at this. So thanks for everyone for chiming in there. I know that those of you who might have chosen something different are saying to yourself, yeah, but this is right. And in fact, it is. It is. But there's always a way in terms of looking at this that we can get the most of our employees. Matt, I'll turn it back over to you, and we'll get a little bit more into these examples throughout this meeting.
Absolutely, and thank you for that quick example there, Brendan. And as Brendan mentions, I mean, this is just one, kind of, small, minute example of the kind of situations you could put participants in within this platform. In fact, we've seen this platform utilized to put, people in situations on everything from crisis management to ethical decision-making practices, cultural awareness, or to directly, go into specific roles, like say a human resource director, for instance. So really the sky's the limit in terms of what you can create on this platform. And in fact, our mantra has been with this is that if you can write an email, then you can write a CapsimInbox micro simulation. So what we can do now is provide a very top level overview of what the CapsimInbox authoring platform seeks to achieve. And essentially what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a web-based platform that would allow anybody to create their own sims, whether you're a seasoned instructional designer or you're a manager that's just starting to create their own tools to evaluate employees. And by extension of that, we wanted to make sure that it was incredibly intuitive and user-friendly in 2 different ways. Number 1, we wanted to make sure the interface very much mimicked the output to make it similar, almost like a PowerPoint deck, where your edit mode and your presentation mode are very similar, but also to have it mirror the very email inboxes that we use on a day-to-day basis in terms of the way you organize your thoughts and input your content. And then as an extension of the user friendliness, we wanted to make sure that anytime you were creating on this platform, when it came to actually implementing the solutions you create, implementing the micro sims with your users, that it had a very low administrative burden. In fact, it's as easy as simply sending a hyperlink for participants to be able to register and then immediately access the simulation. And you as an admin or as a facilitator can sit back and watch the results come in to your administrator portal, which we'll show later on in today's session. And what's great about that is that as you're watching these results come in, you're going to get not only institution level and cohort level information on skill performance, but also very granular information at the individual level, which we'll showcase later as well. But more than anything, what we really try to do in terms of differentiating this tool from a lot of the other instructional design tools out there is that there are absolutely no developmental fees whatsoever, and it is completely free to access the full features of this platform, something that you could sign up as of today and immediately start working. The only fee associated with working with this platform is a $5 end user fee for anybody that goes through your simulation, and that's basically it. And kind of referring back to what Brenda had said about kind of the methodology, how do we exactly create this platform? Well, what we did was we worked with a lot of industrial organizational psychologists, along with many of those in our subject matter experts network, to really try to boil down how can we infuse the science of learning into anything created on this platform. And based on our research, we came up with the following 4 pillars that we feel any instructional tool, including microsimulations, should have to be an effective e-learning solution. And first and foremost, we want to make sure that anything you're creating on this authoring platform, that your simulations are providing an immersive experience. Above all, we want to be able to increase the engagement with the participants and really put them into a more higher fidelity and experiential approach to learning, something that feels much more real and a bit of gamification put in there as well. And then secondly, we wanted to make sure that there was a very minimal learning curve for participants. And this is what's kind of great about our microsimulations taking the form of a simulated email inbox, is that it's instantly practical and it's instantly relatable to everybody out there due to the overwhelming prevalence that we use email correspondence on basically a day-to-day basis. And then thirdly, we wanted to make sure that if you're going to be able to create your own simulation, that it's fully customizable from the top down. Everything from the skills that you'd like to assess out of your participants to the fictional scenario and characters they're interacting with, and even down to the reporting metric as well. You have full reign to change that to meet your specific needs. And then finally, we wanted to make sure it was an affordable solution that had built-in scalability. We want this to be something that's not only cost effective for you, but it's going to be self-directed, easy to implement, and a solution that's going to grow with you, whether you have 5 participants going through it or 5,000, basically. And as a result of that, so you go through the process, you use the platform, and you create your own microsim. What does that output look like for participants? Well, what you're seeing on screen now is the actual user interface. This is exactly what the participant would see upon logging in and going into your microsimulation. And what I can do is kind of talk a little bit about the experience and then very briefly hit on some of the key functions you see on screen. So first and foremost, as a simulated inbox, we tried to design it to look very much like the Outlooks and Gmails that we use on a day-to-day basis, albeit with a bit more minimalist design to it. And essentially, a great way to conceptualize this is that think of it as you're putting participants in the day in the life of an employee at a fictional company, and we're giving them full reign to make the decisions on how they'd see fit. In fact, a better way to kind of describe this would be to think of it like a digital choose your own adventure, where essentially based on the way the participants respond to given emails, they're going to see the consequences of their actions in real time. So participant A and participant B could end up in widely different outcomes if that's the way you want to design it, or you could take a more linear approach that's a bit more standardized for everybody to go through it. Now, how is content actually created? Well, a lot of the times when we work with authors, they're pulling directly from their own experience. Say, for instance, a director of HR that we worked with, who was formerly the director of a large aeronautics company. Well, what he did was he took his 30 years of experience in the industry, took real emails and de-identified them, of course, removing any personal information, and then used those as templates for a great assessment to assess future HR leaders within their organization. And it's really that simple. And he was able to create it with only a few hours time. And now it's one of our more popular versions that we have available. But to talk a little bit too about the format itself, what does this look like in terms of the time length? How many emails are they responding to? Well, typically within a given CapsimInbox experience, we see the average completion time of around 30 to 45 minutes, where they're responding to roughly 20 to 30 emails within that time. And these emails could come from fictional internal and external stakeholders, clients, for instance, or maybe your supervisor in that regard. And you have a couple different ways of responding. You could have multiple choice responses. And as you saw in the previous practical example, a lot of times these aren't just your standard kind of true or false or a binary correct or incorrect choice. We want to make sure that it really mirrored the real world and that there's a lot of nuance to these conversations. There's a lot of nuance to picking an effective solution. And there's a lot of different ways that they can be handled effectively. What it really comes down to is, are you choosing the most effective solution overall? But in addition to your standard pick one choice to respond to the email, we can also do multi-answer responses. Say, I'd love to get your opinion on picking the best 3 out of 5 initiatives I'm proposing. Or say, you can also do, in my personal favorite, which would be written responses. And I can give you an example of how that would work. Say, for instance, you get an initial email where the participant has to do a little bit of investigative research. Maybe they have to go into the company drive that you see there on the left to check a sales promotion, to get back to a client. And then the second one is a managerial decision. I would like to provide the client with this sort of recommendation moving forward for this particular product or service, for example. So you make that decision, and then you get a third email. Let's say it's from your fictional supervisor. Hey, I understand that you had made this decision on the company's behalf. I would love to get your perception on why you thought that was a great decision. I'd like to understand a little bit about your thought process. And this is kind of nice because it takes the participant back a bit. They're like, oh, okay, I just thought I was doing multiple choice here. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to see a qualitative response to the email where they could go as in-depth as they'd like into their reasoning behind a key business decision. While at the same time, you would be able to look at things like email etiquette, for example. Are they properly addressing it to, say, the CEO as opposed to, say, a first-line manager, for example? So a lot of cool variations there. And then additionally, just to go over some really top-level features, of course, you have the timer at the top, where you could set it anywhere that you'd like in terms of to complete the experience, whether it's 5 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, depending on your direct needs. On the left, they'll be able to see any of the emails they need to respond to in the inbox tab. They can click sent items to review anything previously. And then, of course, in the drive folder that I mentioned earlier, you could put any sort of multimedia in there you'd like to really flesh out your fictional universe, whether they be images or documents or even video links that someone may need to look into in order to make a well-informed decision, basically. And this is all parsed too with instant messages that are a little bit more timely that you may have to respond to a bit quicker. But all in all, once you go ahead and complete all of the emails, you'll of course be prompted to exit the experience, and then you'll go ahead and get a feedback report, which we'll focus on here shortly. But now that you have a great idea as to what the participant experience looks like and how they actually navigate the simulation itself, I'd love to turn it back over to Brendan, where he's going to give you a firsthand look behind the scenes as to how these are built with our CapsimInbox authoring platform. Brendan?
Thank you, Matt. And I should say thank you, Tasha, as well, for that fine chat message that we just received.
Absolutely.
You're teeing this up very well for me. So let me actually just open up kind of the back end of this tool so you can see how we build, specifically how we build at Capsim. And just start sharing my screen now. And what you see, as long as that's shown, Matt, thumbs up, cool. What you see is actually the interface that an author would be using as they write their own inboxes. So it kind of looks like an inbox, and I'm just gonna kind of jump out of this for one moment, and I'm gonna hit this preview experience button in the top right that will actually walk through what this inbox looks like in action to the end user. And for context, this is an inbox that our own Matt Shell actually created in a situation to look for a new learning experience coordinator at Capsim. This is somebody that we were bringing on to handle a lot of the client interaction and author work that we do with people who are creating their own inboxes. And we start out with kind of just by setting the scene. You'll see my name is Brendan. I am addressed directly in this. There's some kind of fancy algorithmic logic that we can really put you in the driver's seat of this situation. So we'll walk through kind of a sample situation of Ethan Morrison. He's our director of marketing. These names are fictional, but if you know our people, you would kind of understand where this comes from. This is an email to kind of address the situation of, well, what's going on in the company? We're looking at some new markets to explore. And as you see, there are a few options that the participant could choose from. So as I look at this, you know, I'm not that gung-ho on research. I guess so, Matt. I'll dive into this if you insist. And this will actually trigger a unique response. So Ethan comes back. He says, thanks for my help, and then presents me with a situation that I have to do some external research. So he's saying, why don't you take a look at bls.gov, open a new website, and then we're going to search for career clusters in the search box and find out what cluster has really kind of the most job openings projected? What's going to have the largest growth? This would be a task that Matt's looking to assess in somebody coming in of, can they do independent research? And then can they synthesize information? Again, this is kind of a basic task, but something that we want to get an understanding of to put somebody in the shoes of the role. All the while, we're getting new emails that are coming in. This is a potential author. But in this case, let's take a stab. I'm going to make a guess, and I'm going to say it's actually in our field, education and training. And as I respond to this, this will trigger new responses that come back through the chain of the emails. And so what Ethan's going to say is, you know what? It's actually not the right answer, Bren. You have made a mistake. Now, what I want to do here is show how this is actually created on the actual authoring side. So if I go back to this initial tab that I showed you, this first email that we saw, this new markets to explore from Ethan Morrison, we're going to see a lot of information on this page. But one thing that I want to show you is just how kind of this works from the authoring perspective. So you see that I have this email, I have my entire pane of emails, and I have my responses down at the bottom, which can actually trigger unique responses. And in fact, I think that I guess so response, quite frankly, I think it's kind of weak. And if I were to hear one of my people respond in that way, I might want to actually give some negative points on communication. So in each response, you can target a specific skill that you've identified and then actually play that through to assign points. I can adjust this on the fly. I can add another skill that might be measured by this response. So I can get to a granular level of what I'm trying to cover in this role. Now, in Matt's case, communication was just one of the key skills. And if I actually wanted to trigger a new response from this, I can decide to go off of any of the emails or IMs that I've created, or you know what, I'm just going to create a new IM just for fun to kind of show how this works. This is going to come back from Ethan, and he's going to say, wow, you sound wildly excited. And then I can add responses from here. Oops is one of them. Now, what this email does, as I'm building this out on the fly, it's a goofy, small situation. But what I can show you is that when I'm done editing, and this is triggered by this email, New Markets to Explore, we really built this with kind of a bi-directional linking in mind, that you're not always going to have everything worked out in your head at the exact time that you write these things. So you want to be able to author in a fashion that's nonlinear. That's kind of how our brains work, right? So if I go back to this and actually preview the experience again, I can see on the fly, as this email will come in just a few seconds, that the process that I built can be tested and immediately give me some debugging feedback from the technical standpoint and see if this is something that I like. So let's go back to this I guess so response. I click this, and as the response comes in, I get this note from Ethan saying, wow, really excited. I can make this be anything from direct feedback on what you've done. I can say, you know, instead of approaching the situation like this, it would be more effective to do some research on your own. This would show initiative. So the authoring platform affords the opportunity for complete control over what the end user will see. And those end users are typically your participants. Maybe it's someone that you're bringing into the organization and trying to show what a day in the life at Capsim might look like. Or maybe it's someone you're trying to upskill and train so that they can do a better job in their role. Now, all the while, there's plenty of other things that I can dive into here. I won't spend too much time, but there's keys to in terms of tagging, in terms of information flow, and many of the other bits of scoring and an overall outline view that can help you paint a bigger picture of what is actually going on in your inbox. So you can see my threaded emails and where they will end up going to, along with the requisite skills, the scenario that you've painted, and any of those drive files or attachments that you might want to see. This is a full service authoring platform. And I hope you all get a chance to sign up today and take a look. But for now, I'm going to kick it back over to Matt, and feel free to fire away any questions about the actual experience.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that detailed walkthrough, Brennan. Now what we could do is I'll go ahead and bring back up the presentation here. We can talk a little bit about what the outputs look like from the participant side. So we talked about how you're building it as the author. We've talked about how a participant can go through the microsim experience. Well, what do they get out of it once they actually complete it? Well, the great thing about this is that instantaneously, as soon as they complete your simulation that you've created, that individual is going to be provided with, of course, an individualized feedback report. And what we have here is 4 components that are kind of the standard feedback that are provided every time someone goes through it. With the first aspect being we're able to show their performance by percentile against any sample group that you have established within your organization, or if you're talking about one of our ready to use versions, with the general populace around the globe. And this includes, say you want to try our general management version or people management version, you'd be able to see where your skills stack up against the tens of thousands of other individuals that go through these versions in any given year. Now, secondly, we also provide anybody that goes through a CapsimInbox with a developmental index. And really what this is speaking to is, did they answer the emails in the most proficient way possible? And how consistent was that proficiency throughout the exercise? And then one thing we really haven't highlighted just yet is that to keep it self-directed, we do have a very short 5-minute onboarding period that they go through prior to the simulation. And as a part of that onboarding process, we actually conduct a self-assessment where we ask the participants relative to your peers, where do you place yourself by percentile based on the skills that you'd like to assess? So let's say, for instance, we're looking at the skills on screen, like organizing, problem solving. I may self-assess to say, well, I feel like I'm a pretty good leader. I'm going to put myself in the 60th percentile. But I think I've got some work to do on my problem solving skills. Maybe I'll put myself in the 30th percentile. And then what's great about it is that as soon as they complete the assessment, we compare their self-reported information, their perceived skills with their performance empirically in the micro simulation you've created. And as a result of that, we flesh out the second half of the feedback report, with first providing them with a self-awareness level gauge on a scale of 0 to 6, with higher scores indicating that their perceived skills are much closer to reality, and lower scores could indicate both that they're either overestimating or underestimating their current capabilities, because it's always nice to have a check on those as well. And then by far the most important thing is that we actually plot out the skill gaps. So on the right side of your screen, you'll see we actually plot out their self-awareness level score that they self-reported as well as their inbox assessment score. That way we can not only identify which areas are in most need for improvement for that participant, but also identify key strengths alongside it. And for a lot of assessments and a lot of simulations out there, this is kind of where the process ends. You know, we give them their feedback, but what do you really do with it? Well, what we have as a component within the Inbox authoring platform that you can add to any simulation you create is an optional individual development plan builder, where what you can do is provide your participants with developmental tactics. That way they can create actionable SMART goals. That way they can incorporate your feedback, incorporate the exact action items that they're going to take to improve their skills going forward. And then you as an administrator or facilitator can have the chance to actually evaluate that IDP with the participant. We see this very commonly done with some of the consultants that use this platform. Now, in terms of how do you assess how effective their IDP was? Well, very common what we see this platform used for is for pre and post testing. Where say, for instance, they'll do it once at one part of the year and then maybe 3 weeks, 3 months, or maybe even a year later. And the benefit to that is that since they go through the same simulation, we can actually show you empirical longitudinal development of their skills, the net change between that first and second implementation. So a lot of results to dig into and a lot of customization options as well to make sure you you get the data that you're specifically looking for. And that essentially encapsulates the main components on the participant side. Let's very briefly look at what it looks like on the admin side. So of course, we wanted to continue that intuitive and user-friendly nature of the platform. So what you're seeing on screen here is a very simple administrative dashboard that you'd have access to see any of the results you have within a given cohort and down to the individual level. From the top to the bottom, you'll see that we have the overall score for the entire group against the general populace percentile. It looks like they're performing just above average of the 52nd percentile. You'll also be provided with the averages of each of the individual skill scores for that cohort. And then below that, of course, you'll have the course roster where you can get into individual results to see everything from their overall percentile score, self-awareness levels, when did they complete the assessment, how long did it take them, and if and when they completed an IDP, which again, you have full access to review and provide feedback to the participants. So very straightforward there. And then finally, what I wanted to hit on too, in terms of use cases, was a variety of different ways that we've worked with companies to help them meet their direct needs. And first off, I thought I'd put a little bit of a spotlight on the selection and recruiting component that Brendan alluded to in the platform walkthrough. and how we use this at Capsim. So again, we were trying to create this to look for a new learning experience coordinator to assist our authors with getting through the development process and really making sure that we're bringing their vision to life to the best it can be while sharing best practices. So honestly, over the course of 5 hours, I went in and I created roughly a 15 email experience. Every single one of those emails was based on real emails that I've had interactions with both internal and external stakeholders, including the authors that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And now, how did we implement this? We attached it directly to the job post, so they didn't have to submit anything to go through it. This was open to the public. Anybody could take it. And the funny thing is that we had just as many people that went through the micro simulation that did not submit an application as those that did. And what we found this to be is incredibly mutually beneficial because from the applicant side, they got to have a firsthand detailed role preview of exactly what that job is going to be like that very first day they started, the actual situations and roles and responsibilities that they were going to encounter, as opposed to it being a little bit different from when they actually jump on to a job. And then maybe you have some turnover problems because maybe expectations didn't meet reality, for instance. And then as far as beneficial on our side internally from a recruiting aspect, it allowed us to really look at the results and help us kind of filter, who did we want to prioritize, who really put the time and effort to really flesh out how they conduct market research, where do they think that this platform could really benefit others the most. So I got a great mixture of both qualitative and quantitative feedback, which served as a component in the hiring process prior to actually interviewing everyone there. And then as far as additional use cases, Brendan, would you like to put out any highlights into how we're seeing other companies use this at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to, getting the insights behind how a candidate might think, some of my favorite use cases that I've seen this in are really for identifying skill gaps in high potential employees. Oftentimes there is a leadership development program or a promotion that's coming up where companies have identified that there are some key skills that might be missing in the organization, and they want to get a baseline assessment of where this group stands so that, as Matt said, you can check back in some 3 to 6 months later to review where their growth has been. Now, a big piece of that is some of our off-the-shelf versions have built-in developmental tactics, like Matt says, that have been vetted and verified by a variety of subject matter experts so that your employees can actually have this impact. And really the other aspect that always jumps out to me as something that I suppose when you design a platform, you don't understand how everyone will use it because there are so many options. And one of the things that's been surprising to me is how people have used this for compliance training and using kind of base scenarios that they would need to go through, whether this be some form of harassment or just something in terms of learning some base skills and training at work, that Inbox has been the vehicle to send notes through so that people can respond in a situation that feels like it will at work. And those use cases have been pretty prominent, but as I said, that compliance one definitely surprised me. I did not see that coming out of the gate when we launched this.
Yeah. And just to add a quick note to what Brendan was saying, the funny thing is too with this is that we've seen this utilized in ways that we hadn't even thought of when we were designing it. So we find new cases every day of how this can be utilized. But in closing, as we move towards the Q&A here in about 3 minutes, the final things we wanted to cover was the different options you have available to work with us and the levels of involvement that we can play in helping you meet your needs with micro simulations, and then also to showcase the very versions that we'd be happy to give you and any of your colleagues full access to try. We'd be even happy to set up a pilot with your organization if you'd like to see how this is implemented and get feedback from some of your participants. But basically, the 3 models that you could work with us are as follows. You could go the ready to use route, where you take one of our off the shelf solutions that have already been created, and we'll share those in just a second. And the benefits of this is that you can immediately implement it. You instantly get your data compared with the general global populace in that sample group. And these are all priced very cost effectively at only $30 per user to go through and get everything that you've seen thus far. The second option is what we've been primarily focusing on during today's presentation, the build your own option, where you use the SaaS style authoring platform yourself, develop at your own pace. There are no development or access fees whatsoever, and you just pay that $5 end user fee. And then the third option, more of a collaborative or partnership model, if you will, is that say you have an idea on what you want to create, the outcomes you want to achieve, but you may not want to spend the direct time developing it yourself. Well, in this case, we'll work directly with you, talk with the key stakeholders of your company, and then incorporate our own IO psychologists and subject matter experts to create a solution that directly meets your needs. And we're actually able to do this incredibly quickly. We have a turnaround of roughly 4 to 6 weeks to create, a roughly 15 to 20-minute experience for you with minimal touch points to your team. And the only difference in price is that we do, of course, increase that per user fee due to the customization of it to roughly $100 per end user to go through that. And then finally, before we move to Q&A, if any of these you'd like to try yourself, if you'd like, or if you have an idea, but you want to see how other authors have brought their visions to life, we'd be happy to give you access to any of the versions on screen right here and now, with some of our more popular versions being on the soft skills side, like general and people management, which have been great for first level managers and supervisory roles respectively. But we're also seeing a lot of people interested in topics like ethical decision making, time management, crisis management, cultural awareness, or even human resources specifically. And again, happy to not just provide access, but even talk with you about potentially piloting this as well. And in fact, to close, if you'd like to contact us, feel free to let us know at our booth. We have our exhibit booth open. And in fact, the very person we've been referring to, that our learning experience coordinator, Kelsey Zimmerman, would be happy to answer any questions you have there as well. So with that, we can go ahead and move to Q&A, and we'd love to hear what you all think of the solution. And thank you so far for your time. Any questions we can field?
Thank y'all, Matt and Brendan, and y'all feel free to turn those mics on and ask your questions.
Hi, my name is Lamar. My company is based actually in Europe, and we have a lot of GDPR and privacy regulations that we have to follow here. Are any of your clients based in Europe or having to comply with GDPR regulations?
Indeed. Yeah, so Lamar, your comment on kind of not publishing personally identifiable data in terms of both administrative side and kind of in our global population. We have several clients in Europe and throughout kind of the globe that have this same, we'll say, need to cover. What we do there is ensure that individual IDs are kind of assigned and hashed to each of your employees that go through. And then on your side, you can have these, this connection so that only you have access to the personally identifiable information. In that way, we are trying to remove any barriers for anyone overseas to use this product because there are different data challenges, whether you be across the EU or in China. We need to make sure that this is a solution that can work for everyone.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, I also see we have an additional comment and a question in the chat. First one, a comment. I can see how the time management course would be really useful now in a virtual environment. Absolutely, Dr. Horn. In fact, this has been one of our more popular versions because it's also one of our most intense versions. You only have 30 minutes, and actually by design, this is meant to it. So you're really going to have a hard time responding to everything. So it really is trying to focus on your awareness and dealing with multiple projects at once, as well as prioritizing those very issues. And can you ward off procrastination as well, basically. And then I see another question coming in from Evan. Is there a hybrid of the top two options? Evan, if you could clarify, were you referring to the general management and people management versions, or were you referring to the ready to use with build your own options? In the meantime, I could feel the first one in that general management and people management, those ready to use versions are by far our most common adoption. A lot of times we see them used as a pre and post test because they measure the same core skills. So you can have two completely differentiated experience, yet still get that pre and post test information from there.
I'm specifically referring to the ready to go options and the ones that you make on your own. Would we be able to take some of the ready to go options and make some of our own, like a combination of those?
Yeah, so we do have starting templates that you can build off of. There is kind of two dynamics to the question that you asked. One is the work that has been created. Those are owned by authors, and these are people who are experts in the field, whether they're doing research and PhD programs, they're regularly published. So that process, if we are using any direct content from there, it has to be approved. Now, the second point, which ties into kind of this in a more broad scale, is we have base templates that integrate many of those same situations as we kind of think of them as critical incidents that you can plug directly into your own versions to build a top. Really just trying to reduce that friction for you to get from start to finish.
Excellent. And then we have another question from Tracy. What about languages? Is English the only option? So happy to say here, Tracy, is that you can input whatever language you would like into the platform. In fact, at this time, we've seen versions created in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and German as kind of the main ones we've seen so far. The only caveat is that there are certain aspects of the platform that are hard-coded in English temporarily from the author's perspective, with maybe a very light amount on the participant side. However, we're fully aware of this and already taking the steps to make sure we accommodate for that in the future. But in terms of if you wanted to integrate it into a different language, you're more than welcome to do that, and everything will work just perfectly fine that way.
Yeah, and for context, that hard-coded language is stuff that quite easy to fix downstream. It's headers, it's things like welcome to CapsimInbox, statements of that nature. So realistically, this is something that our development team's looking at with larger use cases. If you have a big program with a specific language, we can chat about integrating that.
Yeah. And then we have another question from Dr. Horn around video. Can you integrate video into this platform? See how it'd be useful from a leadership training and want to simulate having virtual conversations. So in fact, yes, you can. So in addition to being able to add it as a Drive file and directly attach it to given emails, we actually have it on our roadmap where you'll be able to embed them directly into the emails themselves as well. So
yeah, and that's a fairly seamless process. Really, any attachment that you're looking to add, whether this is a I don't know, we'd say a 5,000 line Excel file that you need to kind of port data into a tool like Tableau, or just a standard video, image, PDF, anything that you create, extremely simple just to drop in. You can drop this in as like an email attachment. So as you open your email, you have an email attachment that's kind of standard, or it can just be your default hyperlink within the email itself that you can click through. So we've really worked to ensure that this is as seamless and as an experience that you would come to expect when you open your Outlooks and Gmails and other email clients around the world. You pop into this experience and it feels like email. Which can actually be a little bit of a test for some people.
I do have a request to show the slide with the 3 options real quick here, so I'll go ahead and bring that back. But also, I actually have a question for the group if you all don't mind. We talked about a couple different use cases like certification, compliance training, as Brendan mentioned, selection and hiring. As training professionals, is there any particular use cases or any thoughts or ideas that come to your mind when seeing this type of platform of how it could most benefit your company? We'd love to get your feedback on that.
For me, I was thinking about a way to for retention processes, how to be able to overcome objections and how to be able to deal with these first response when there's multiple issues coming at you in regards to that. So that's where I went to first thing for retention management.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Lamar. I appreciate it. I see a lot of other mentions of customer service, case management, mentor training, soft skill empathy training. Interesting. Sales training again, compliance there as well. Leadership development generally. Excellent. Racial equity as well. Excellent. Leadership essentials. Very nice. Appreciate the feedback, everybody. Is there any other questions that we could field at this time?
That culture shaping for organizations, that's something that we used internally. So not to geek out too much on this, but Matt already kind of showed off the case of how he hired someone. I've done the same for a product manager position, and we've actually created a culture fit inbox in our company so that anyone who comes in gets to see a little bit what life is like before they jump into the shoes of becoming a Capsimian.
Yep. And then Brendan, I see we've got a great question for you here. Can this integrate with our LMS?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So right now, what we do in terms of the LMS integration, we determine what protocol that you use, whether it's XAPI all the way through to any of the SCORM or anything else, and we have a hands-on approach with you and your administrative team. That typically, with kind of delays and back and forth that is inherent in these kind of things, usually is only about a 2-week process. So we get that started as soon as we start talking about actually developing with you.
Excellent. Any final questions we could field at this time? What support is offered for learning the system? Excellent question, Ellen. In fact, you'd be able to work directly with Kelsey and myself, where we could perform one-on-one workshops with you. Where if you'd like to demonstrate this to an entire team, we could do like a first session where perhaps we showcase the capabilities of the platform and what the output looks like, just like we do here. And then we can have a more structured workshop where we really get into the details of key functionality, how to build your build something that's going to meet your direct needs, and really make sure that if you have a concept in mind, that we can achieve it within the platform and share best practices alongside that. So that would be just reaching out to us directly, Kelsey or myself, and we can schedule a chat where we can walk you through that at any point in time you'd like. So,
and if you're kind of like me and admittedly are like hands off, I can do this myself. We have tutorials on the site. We actually have a full course that you can go through to do this. It's about 45 minutes long. But admittedly, I have personally seen the best success with somebody jumping in, and there are a lot of prompts as you go through on each page to kind of help you think through what are the key learning objectives that I'm thinking about. How have other authors created these as skills? How are they represented in the form of emails? What's the scenario that'll be most feasible to helping my learners achieve success? So all of that is baked into the product itself. But I don't want to discount what Matt and Kelsey and our entire team does, because it is truly hands-on support in case you need that as you build out what you're doing.
yep. Excellent. Appreciate the feedback, Dr. Horn, there as well. Very much appreciated there. Also, just to reiterate one final time, if you have any questions, if you'd like to learn more, please feel free to navigate to our exhibit booth, where we have a variety of these resources already there. If you want to learn more about the methodology, we have a great technical synopsis on this. If you'd like to schedule a Calendly chat with me directly, my information is on there as well. And if you'd like to get access to any of these immediately, feel free to connect with Kelsey or myself, and we'll get you set up in no time, and maybe even perhaps do a workshop with you where we can talk about how you can start the creation. So thanks again for your time, everybody. Very much appreciate it. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the TICE conference.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Yeah, thank you again, Matt and Brendan. Everybody, the room will be staying open for about 10 minutes more. If you have any lingering questions, feel free to stick around. But if not, we hope to see you at Speed Networking this evening, starting in just about 15 minutes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hope.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. I have a question.
Yes.
Or wait, I guess I need to, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. There we go. All right.